From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts.
There should never be a single point of failure in our world. The electoral process needs to be so fortified, whether it be through security parameters, safety for your staff, health breaks, making sure mentally that they're in the game and we're taking care of them as their leaders. You have to have that fortification.
Welcome to Community Catalysts. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. If you're serving in local leadership right now, you're carrying more than a title. You're carrying expectations and scrutiny and a level of responsibility that doesn't clock out when the meeting ends. Trust feels harder to earn, decisions feel heavier, and the consequences land close to home. That's because in counties, school districts, cities, and towns, governance becomes personal. Decisions are made nearby and carried out by people the community knows, and judgment isn't just exercised, it's tested in real time in full view of the community. This podcast is for leaders like you. It's a space to pause, reflect, and learn from others who are carrying the same weight while still finding their footing. My guest today works at one of the most foundational points in local governance. Dana Lewis is the Pinal County recorder and officer in charge of elections in one of the fastest growing counties in the country. While national elections dominate the headlines, the work that makes them possible happens locally, county by county. Pinal County sits between the Phoenix and Tucson metro areas, and administering elections there means serving a rapidly growing community that spans urban and rural realities at a moment when public attention is intense and trust cannot be taken for granted. I'm especially interested in learning how Dana thinks about leadership under those conditions, how judgment takes shape, how integrity is protected, and how trust is earned one decision at a time. Dana Lewis, welcome to Community Catalysts.
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so grateful to you, and I'm so grateful for you taking the time. This is such an important topic. Look, before we talk about elections or even job titles, can we just start with you? When you think about who you were before you took on this role, what parts of your life or your earlier work do you now recognize as shaping the way you lead today?
I think I've always had a servant heart. And I understand from just, high school and then serving in the military that you have to be in it to be able to have an opinion about it. So once I got out of the military, I was married. I wanted to get back involved in the community. So from being a poll worker to even little things like serving on local school board or the Head Start Coalition. I had small children, so it just made sense wanting to be involved with their academia. And from there, it just kind of took on a life of its own. Had a small business in Montana. After my marriage failed, I moved to Arizona where I had a network of support. And so found here that I was starting over and automatically the need to go into the civil service again the calling was there. I applied for positions in city government and county government, and I started as an election specialist. And from there, I tenaciously worked my way up the ladder.
I have to go right there. I mean, I think it's safe to say no one grows up thinking that their career goal is to run elections. So how did you find this work? How did this work find you?
I had originally applied for a recording position, and that's one of those entry-level positions in the county that I think is very much overlooked. I don't think people understand how important the recordation of our properties and deeds are. And I was really, I love history. So I was really intrigued by that. I'd applied, but there was a bigger pool of applicants and I didn't get the call. And there was also a second call for like public works and the city. And when I got the interview with the elections department, as soon as I sat down and met with the director, I knew that was somewhere I needed to work. I needed to be there. At that point, we were coming out of the 2016 elections and there was a lot of hullabaloo, but there was a feeling, there was a vibe and an energy that somebody who's both like, high energy loves. And I could see that there could be chaos at times, but the ability to manage it was very, very evident in the crew that was there. So when I was offered the position, I took that one.
Tell me more about the expectations coming into the job. What did you think the job was going to be? How was it different when you actually started doing the work?
So when I was serving in the military, I was lucky enough to be one of the catalysts that when they were utilizing the military personnel flight for a voting location, I was one of the people who was there making sure the room was set up okay, the ballots were coming in, everything was secured, and then was a poll worker in my civilian life. So I understood what it took, I think on a much smaller scale. So I knew that there's a big, kickoff to it, several months of high intensity, and then it would kind of dissipate again. So I didn't go in completely unaware what the elections department did. I was really blessed. But this was also a time before there was a high amount of early voting. So I got to learn all about that flip of the coin. Still believe once you get your foot in the door and your butt in the seat, it's one of those situations where either the bug bites you or it doesn't. I've watched a lot of employees come and go because of the chaos, because of the scrutiny. We're constantly under a magnifying glass, and some people don't excel at that. It's, they like being in the background. When you're in the elections world, you're very much out there with everybody. And I got bit by the bug right away, and I've been going at it ever since.
Dana, maybe I shouldn't be surprised by it, but you said that there was elections work that you were doing when you were in the military. I'd love to know what that was about. It never occurred to me.
Oh, absolutely. So if you're active duty, sometimes they'll put up polling places in for the civilians and the contractors at the at the military personnel flight, and then also off post, and then you can also, as a personnelist, that's what I was, be signed up to work with the UOCAVA process, now been updated with the MOVE Act. So that's for uniform overseas citizens, absentee voters. That's how members in the military, their civilian dependents, or even contractors or reporters have the ability to still cast their ballot when they're not in their home location. And so we work with people in the community as military personnel regarding those programs. So I had a guess about what I was getting myself into. Now here in Arizona and Pinal County, the UOCAVA program is housed under the early voting department and voter registration, which is great because they're absentee voters or early voters. That's on the different side of the house than the elections department.
Let's talk about your journey at Pinal County. As we were preparing for today, you told me that there was a pretty challenging episode back, I think it was in 2022. And why don't you walk us through the story of how you came into this and how you ended up with these responsibilities?
So in 2019, I became an election specialist. At that time, I can't say you would only, but you normally saw elections during even years. So the midterms are for us right now in 2026. 2028 will be another round of presidential elections with primaries and general elections. But you weren't really seeing them in off years, maybe the one-off small jurisdictional election. So I was able to get some jurisdictional or baby elections underneath my belt, but then we went into a little bit of a lull. And I don't like to be bored. And so I utilized that time as an election specialist to learn about the legislative process, to learn about how when bills are being enacted, how they could possibly launch us into a place of uncertainty in our processes. And so being able to vocalize that to leadership, because they have the ability to testify on those bills when they're on the floor. Hey, this works right now because this is the way voter registration works. But if they make this change in the law, then this is going to prevent us from doing this. Or, oh my gosh, this is such a great thing. If they give it a holiday here, then look at all of the polling locations we'd be able to utilize. So you get to have those conversations. So I got really immersed in that. And it was really awesome to learn about that. And then I had the ability to cross train. So not only was I a candidate filing officer and managing campaign finance stuff, I also had the ability to start with poll worker training and working with special taxing districts. And then, of course, polling places. Then I'd be able to go out to different facilities and look to see if they were ADA compliant or not. So we were lucky. We had a small team. So that meant we got a lot of cross training. And then there were some things that happened. After the 2020 election, our director went on to greener pastures. She went on to work in one of the largest counties in Nevada, and she wanted to get out of the heat and go to somewhere that had, wonderful seasons that we don't have here in Arizona. And but she was a really great mentor. When we were waiting for a new elections director, there was a lot of movement, and sometimes there's uncertainty with that. Staff left, and we were kind of left wondering. I unfortunately was one of those people, but then an amazing opportunity presented itself. The recorder, she's an elected official, had noticed some of my work, and a member of her staff had reached out and said that she was going to be hiring a compliance officer. So the term or the title was assistant to the recorder. And so I was brought on because there were several staff members that were at the edge of retirement, and there wasn't great standard operating procedures. So the concern was all of that wealth of information was going to walk out the door and never be captured. So my task when I was hired as the compliance officer was to ensure, one, we were in step with all of the things to do with the changes in legislation, and then making sure I was putting them in desktop procedures. So working really fast and furious. We had just come out of a legislative session. We had two supervisors who were retiring. I was working with them day in and day out to capture as much information as possible, and working with the recorder and learning about the community on a greater, learning the partners and the stakeholders, getting to interface with a lot of the department heads as we were working to see the recordation process, learning about indexing and voter registration. And then they hired an elections director. And unfortunately, things didn't go so well in 2022 for Pinal County. We were found in the news because they had unfortunately printed ballots that didn't have the correct races on them. And so we had to do an additional set of ballots that did have the correct races on them for municipalities. So the ballots were printed without the correct races. We sent out a supplemental municipal ballot to the people so that they could have the ability to vote in the correct elections. And then it went worse. Unfortunately, the persons in charge of those processes had not ordered enough ballots for election day. So you come out of early voting.
Oh, no.
You find out from the mayor who's running for office that his name's not on the ballot. You work in quick time to help them remedy that process. And then we get to election day. And I unfortunately was one of the people who showed up at my polling location, and it wasn't ready to open. So we're about to bust opening time. Again, I had worked in the elections department at that time. I knew how to set up the polling location. I knew how to get all of the equipment online, get the signs out, make sure that they were all statutory compliant and we were following the law. And then the calls started coming in. I had a county phone, and I was hearing that it wasn't just my polling location that happened to have a problem. Of course, as the assistant to the recorder, I was able to be in quick time with her, explain what I was seeing in the field, went ahead and cast my ballot, made sure that everything was documented, wrote a statement, got back to the office real quick, and started to come up with a plan on how we were going to help them make sure that they had enough ballots. And that was getting out early ballots to the locations, ensuring that people understood how to use the express vote to vote in those locations, and just trying to troubleshoot and work through the chaos as it happened.
Dana, you're not just describing like an unfortunate typo. You're talking about the collapse of the entire system.
It was unfortunate. And for someone who was bit by the bug and loved what she did in the elections department and was blessed to have the ability to go work for the recorder, which is the sister department to the elections department, it was heart-wrenching. It was heart-wrenching to walk through that and to see it firsthand. It was scary at times. And as a person of faith, sometimes that's a difficult thing to say, is that there's a place of fear. But what was really great is watching the county come together as a team, understanding that we had troubleshooters out and about. We had satellite offices. We could do quick chain of custody for early ballots, knew that no matter what, when you're tabulating, you have the ability for the pocket of ballots, in tabulation for early, for provisional, and for election day. So we knew that during all of our processing, we were still going to be clean that way. And then helping put out the fires. And then, of course, coordinating efforts with department leadership. So that happened.
Long story short, sometime after that, you are named the officer in charge of elections?
So what happened next is my boss, who was Virginia Ross, the recorder and elected person, she had worked with the elections department, 10 years prior to being the recorder. She stepped down from her elected position. She became the elections director, and they appointed me to be the recorder of Pinal County. So it was a very weird thing, but it was a really great thing because we already had an amazing working relationship. So knowing that between your primary and general election, you have a short window of time, we were able to work in quick concert very closely and ensure that once we were able to get the primary election canvass and put to bed, we were working automatically to ensure that the general election was going to be able to get out the gate. I can't say flawlessly, but absolutely in a better space than we were able to accomplish the primary.
Wow. Dana, what's the takeaway that someone should find in this story? Is it that mistakes happen, that systems fail, and that it matters more how we pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and go forward? Or is there a story in here that says, boy, that should never happen? The elections process needs to be sacrosanct and robust and proven, and there's just no excuse for that to happen. How would you ask me to look at that situation?
I think it's multifaceted, Matt. Absolutely. In our world, they expect perfection. And if there's anyone who can say humans aren't perfect, so of course there's going to be mistakes. Mistake on a ballot, like spelling commission incorrectly, like we did happen to have that problem in 2024 under my regime. It happens. There are mistakes that happen. Sometimes, you have a poll worker drop out and, you're working to ensure that you have a secondary there. Staff sometimes get burnt out or they get sick and can't be there. There should never be a single point of failure in our world. The electoral process needs to be so fortified, whether it be through security parameters, safety for your staff, health breaks, making sure mentally that they're in the game and we're taking care of them as their leaders. You have to have that fortification. And when you have that fortification, then the members of the team support one another. So if you're walking by a cubicle of a coworker and you're listening to them do ballot proofing and they're stumbling through something, hey, it sounds like you're tired. How about I take the next chapter of this and you go take a break and then we'll hit it together. Hey, I can't be here tomorrow to go do the ADA checks on these polling locations. And then another member of the team says, okay, we're on short deadlines. I've got it for you tomorrow. Let's rally back on Thursday. When you work in concert as a team, then it's a lot harder to fail. And I think that's one of the things that happened in 2022. But because we came together as a county, we were able to ensure that it didn't happen again. But unfortunately, when you have people in positions that don't say, hey, I think I might be in over my head, or I need resources, or this isn't going to work, or would you mind looking at my work because I'm a little tired and I need a second set of eyes. It's okay to be human and be humble and know that we're not perfect. Asking for help shouldn't be seen as a bad thing. And I think today's society, they put such pressure on people that they don't. I hope that, in the last few years, we've learned from the experiences of 2022. Going into 2024, we knew we needed more space. presidential elections are big and they take a lot of people. And one of the things that we found in 2022 that we needed more space and we needed more people. And because county leadership realized that, they worked with us, not against us, to hear our voices. And we looked at the processes, we looked at the people, we made sure they had that support. And then they created this amazing facility that I'm sitting in right now, the Pinal Votes facility. So it's voter operations, technology, and election services. It is a over 50,000 square foot facility that took in mind not only the need for space, but for security parameters, but also for transparency. One of the best ways to reestablish trust in a process is to be transparent about the hardships, but also let people see what we've done to make it better, but invite them into our world again. And that's one of the things election officials kind of struggled with prior to 2024. Some things happened in 2020 that left a bad taste in people's mouths, left people a little bit raw. You came out of COVID and that wasn't a great place to be either. And so I think we were in a place operating where we wanted to be behind the scenes. That doesn't work for democracy. Democracy dies in the dark. You need to shine the light on it and pull the curtain back. And when we created the Votes facility, it was all about transparency. People can now come in to the fishbowl area and they can watch in real time as we're doing signature verification of affidavits of ballots. They can watch the early board create the anonymity of the process where you take the ballot away from the affidavit and then watch the chain of custody as that ballot goes to tabulation and watch the bipartisan teams work through tabulation. They can watch as we can air gap our processes and that our servers are never connected to the internet. They can ask every member of the team about the process and every one of them can walk them through a personal tour.
Dana, you love the system. I can hear it in your voice. You love the system. It makes sense. It's clear. It's got integrity built into it. And it sounds like what you're saying is it's not just the system. It's got to be the commitment of the people who are working that system, that's critical to the success of this as well.
Absolutely. If you don't love what you do, you're going to be dreading going to work every day. You have to have morale and you have to have passion in what you do, and you have to be heard by your leadership. So when people come to work, sometimes I even get tunnel vision on the next thing that's happening. And so when a team member says, "Hey, we were thinking about trying to, engross the Pinal County employees. So we want to be a part of new hire orientation because we're always talking to the public about voter registration and voter outreach, but we've got 50% of our employees aren't even signed up to be, poll workers or aren't a part of our process. How do we do that better, Dana?" And I was like, go draft something, bring it to me. Let's talk about how we're going to get Pinal County employees involved in the process, other than the ones that are election specialists. And we were able to embark on an ambassador program. So if you're a Pinal County employee, and you have the ability and the support of your supervisors, then we will bring you in. And on election day, you can be part of the receiving board. You can be a troubleshooter out in the community, roving our polling places, or you can even be at a polling location as a logoed employee, so that when a poll worker or a voter has a question or concern, they see that, they know we're branded, and they're going to go to that person and say, "Hey, I heard about this process that you have. Can you explain that to me?" That ambassador will walk out of the 75-foot zone so it doesn't ever feel like anybody's electioneering, and they can walk them through our processes. Like, "Hey, how come that person didn't have to show an ID? Oh, they left in their coat in the car and it's raining. So they're going to go in and they're going to cure that provisional within the next 5 days." And it's completely appropriate. So those ambassadors know all of our processes inside and out, and they become catalysts and advocates for us out in the community.
Okay, so at the risk of yucking your yum, I have to ask you what it's like to be responsible for election processes in this political environment. The administration in Washington is questioning the integrity of election processes all over the country, and the scrutiny that's coming onto it, the political divisiveness that's been invested in the elections process, it's got to be affecting you in Pinal County. It's got to be affecting everyone everywhere. And I'm wondering, how do you even function differently under that kind of not just scrutiny, but under that kind of skepticism or even cynicism?
I think since 2012, we started seeing this vitriol being spewed at election officials and just the process. I think there are so many people who really don't understand the checks and balances that are embedded in our systems. And because they don't understand them, or nobody has given them the chance to walk through it, that they just create these stories in the background and they let those stories kind of fester. Then you go through 2016. Of course, there was issues there during those elections. 2020, of course, we know between COVID and everything else going on in our world, again, more vitriol and not understanding the process. I think from 2020 to 2024, again, peaceful transitions of power, understanding our processes, election officials being more willing to have those conversations with stakeholders in the community, being more open to meet with people like Matt Lehrman in his podcast, and not being afraid of journalism or reporters, and then also trying to embrace social media instead of push back on it. We're trying to utilize the social media aspect to be out there and be more present. So they click on our social media and then go to our trusted resources. But we also see how the hate resides in social media. It is not always fun. We know that there's threats out there. We know that people utilize it for not a place of good, kindness, or humble. It's really easy to hate behind a keyboard. It's really hard to hate up close and personal to somebody. In America, I think we've lost civil discourse where I can have a conversation like I'm having with you right now, Matt, and we can agree to disagree and still walk away, and I can respect you as a human being. We've lost that because people get behind their phones, their tablets, and their laptops, and that interpersonal relationship goes away. We're seeing that in administrations, and all across the world. And sometimes it's a sticky situation I have to navigate. I would always rather have the conversation with those persons up close and personal, invite them to come in, to listen to us, to see the things that we do to make sure that our processes are efficient, that we have chain of custody, that there are audit trails, that we certify our equipment, we canvass our elections. But I also make sure that I'm keeping my people safe. I can't say that we're not aware of what's going on in other states. Of course we are. And we're in very different times than we've ever been in. So every week we brief our staff, we let them know what's going on, what we're hearing, what we're seeing in different podcasts or different venues. We scrub the socials, we scrub all of the media stuff. And then we say, so this is happening here, this is happening there. In the event that this were to come to our doorstep, don't worry, as the officer in charge of elections, I'm going to be the one on the front. And I want you guys all to exit out the back because nobody needs to be in the threshold of anything potentially going the way that we hadn't envisioned it. So we're going to get you safe. And then the people who are in charge of this process have a chain of command that they're going to offer up into. And we're going to go from there. We do our best to make sure on the daily that our staff know we've got them, we've got their six always, and that no matter what, we're going to persevere through this because Americans and everybody who votes needs to know that we're willing to work through this process together. And through that, again, trust is going to be re-envisioned into our processes.
Dana, there's so much in there I want to ask you about. The first thing is, it's fascinating to me to hear you say that that you're proactive in the realm of social media. And I'm wondering if there's an actual strategy that you can point to. I understand the concept of if people are going to say terrible things, then we're going to invite them in. We're going to give them tours. We're going to be transparent. But can I ask you, do people actually take you up on that offer? And when they come in, these skeptical people, these people who are, as you said, easy to hate behind the keyboard, do they actually come in and emerge feeling like, oh, I'm so grateful, and now I understand, and now I trust that this system actually works the way it's supposed to?
I would like to hope that I'm a little bit disarming. I'm a whole whopping 5 foot tall, and I like to meet people where they're at. I'm out in the community a lot. I send our people out into the community. We have a robust voter outreach program. So we're always trying to have those conversations at community events. And that's where we invite them in, because I can invite them in on social media. But what I try to do is when we start seeing those things, like we have legislation, we're about to move our primary election up by 2 weeks in an election year, something that's very unprecedented, but we've been trying to do for a long time. And we currently had the support of everybody in the administration we needed. So we've been very proactive. I get up at the board meetings and I tell people, hey, this is what's going on in our election world and legislation. I don't want you to think I'm blindsiding you. We're aware of this. We've been part of the process. So we have those conversations. I don't engage in hate. I will never do that. I think the worst thing I've done recently is I asked the question. I said, whatever happened to proper decorum, kindness, and process during open meetings? That we are careful and kind with one another. I've seen that really slip away in our open meeting forums. I really hope we can get to a place where we can invite that back in. But I'm not afraid to speak my mind. Sometimes I don't agree with other elected officials, but I have those conversations with them, politely. And we've been battling with the Secretary of State here in Arizona. We have the elections procedure manual, and sometimes things in that affect us in Pinal County a little bit differently. We are a precinct-based model. We're the last precinct-based model in the state of Arizona. That is a model that is put forth by the Board of Supervisors as their officer in charge of election. I must follow their lead on that. And sometimes I've got people who are hating on why we aren't being more progressive and moving forward. Vote centers are great. They're time saving. And then I've got other people who are like, no, we're getting away from community and the cornerstone of our, elections, which are precinct based. So we get a lot of that. I try not to interact with them one-on-one. I try to allow the people to interact together on that. I hope that helps them get to a place of civil discourse in a great space. I hope.
Dana, if someone is involved in local government, they're serving as an elected or an appointed official, or for that matter, if they're just active in their community and concerned or interested, just talk about in Pinal County first. How can they get in touch with your office? What can they have access to see? What should they do to be proactive to assure themselves that the system is secure and has integrity in it?
So we have Tuesday tours, but we don't do them on Tuesdays only. They can sign up at the Votes website, Pinal Votes. They just got to Google us, and we'll get them registered for one of our tours. They will go through a short presentation explaining who we are, who we work with, what we do. And then they'll be taken on a personal tour of our facility. And depending if we have live ballots on we call them babies on board. If we have ballots on board, then they may or may not be able to go into certain areas for security protocols. But we have two different types of tours we can give. If it's local electeds that just want, down and dirty about what we do because they only get like 30-minute bites to be able to get out there into the community, we can absolutely accomplish that. But come out, come see what it looks like. Ask the hard questions. Throw the conspiracy theories against us and let us unhash them. Let us explain what logic and accuracy testing is to certify all of our equipment. Let's explain what a closed network looks like. Yes, their machines are connected, but they're only connected to each other. They never touch the internet. Talk to our people. Feel that, reassurance that we know what we're doing. And then ask those questions. Then ask how you or somebody you love or somebody you're close with can become involved with the process, whether, again, being a poll worker, being a part of an early board, being a part of a special election board. That's something we didn't get a chance to talk with. We have people who are sometimes confined, whether it be in jail because they're sitting out a traffic fine, or maybe they're hospitalized or found themselves in a time where they don't have transportation. We have the ability using bipartisan special election boards with an election official to go to them and ensure that they have the right to cast a ballot. So it's one of those great things that people don't know we can do. So let's talk about how people can sign up to be special election board workers or be political observers, because it's really awesome. You talk about all of the things that we do, and political observers are part of the people that make sure the process is clean. Again, if you're part of the process, you're part of the progress, you're not part of the problem. And we love that. So be a political observer, sign up with your party and be in a bipartisan team that's out at a voting location. And it's not a bad thing to watch what's happening, because sometimes bad things do happen at polling locations. Sometimes people get hurt. Sometimes something didn't open on time, or sometimes something went really great. And those bipartisan partners that are there are able to then give statements or talk about it. You know, when things went wrong in the 2022 election, it was those political observers that were able to give statements and explain what went wrong and what we needed to do to fix it. So I'm a big fan of political observers.
I have one last question I have to ask you.
Sure.
You know, we live in divisive times and cynical times. You come across, so genuine and authentic. Your respect for this process, your enthusiasm for making it work. And I just have to ask you personally, what keeps you going? I have to imagine that the stress of doing this is hard, and there are going to be screw-ups, and people are going to point fingers, and they're going to say all kinds of nasty things. How do you keep yourself charged up to do this kind of work?
It's the call. It really is. I know what I am doing is really important. I know that I have an amazing team behind me in this world, whether it be personal or even the team I work with every day. I'm blessed to have county leadership that supports what I do. It's real easy to fill your cup again when you know you're supported. And there's another thing. In the elections community, we have watched administrators leave since 2020 in droves, and we haven't had the ability to regroup and recoup that loss in personnel at the way that we've lost them. And then we are seeing threats on election officials and candidates 200% more than we have ever seen before. And if by being here and showing people that I'm not scared and I'm willing to do it, and I can bring people back into the trenches with me, then that charges my cup. I know what I'm doing is important, and I want people who are like-minded and hardworking to come do it with me. So that's what charges me up.
Dana Lewis, it has been absolutely wonderful talking to you. I thank you so much for your candor, for your enthusiasm, and for your commitment to this. It's incredibly important. I'm really grateful for the chance to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. This was a great conversation, and I hope people go out and have conversations like this more in their communities.
My thanks again to Dana Lewis, Pinal County Recorder and Officer in Charge of Elections. Listening to Dana, I'm reminded how easy it is to take elections and so many other civic systems for granted. Movies and television tend to show us the face of government, the speeches, the conflicts, the moments of drama. What they rarely show is the spine of systems that make public life function at all, the procedures, safeguards, and the people whose work is steady, precise, and largely unseen. Bureaucracy, it often gets a bad reputation. It's associated with inefficiency or distance. But conversations like this are a reminder that those systems also provide continuity, stability, and trust. They are the accumulated work that allows communities to function, for decisions to hold, and for democracy to operate day after day. Dana's leadership invites us to notice that invisible infrastructure and to better understand and value and support the people who keep it working. If this conversation sparked an idea, raised a question, or got you thinking about your own leadership, I'd love to hear from you. You're welcome to call 602-688-2724 and leave a short message. Ask a question or tell me what you're thinking or what you'd like to hear explored next. I listen to every message, and your reflections genuinely help shape future episodes. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, you can now find my column on Substack. It's called Democracy Runs on Dialogue, and I've added a direct link in the program notes. And if you'd be interested in sharing some of the hard-earned lessons from your own leadership journey, I invite you to apply to be a guest. You'll find the podcast guest link in the show notes. Your story might just inspire and instruct another leader as they work to serve their own community. Community Catalysts is edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.